And as always, your views and comments are welcome on this show. Look for Joy News on Facebook. Also, at Joy News on TV for Twitter. Drop your comments. We'll be glad to share your thoughts with the rest of the world. But we'll begin with what has been one of the most sought-after bills and had a lot of conversation about it. Today, petitioners opposed to the Postal Packets and Telecommunication Messages Bill have been meeting Parliament's Defence and Interior Committee in what has been the first of many in closed-door sessions to deliberate on their concerns. The bill seeks to harmonize the various regulations that exist on the security of post, government interception of parcels, general communications, among others. Well, only yesterday, the chairman of the committee, Fritz Baffo, told us the committee will be hearing the concerns of the public on the matter in a public hearing today. But that was not to be today because the committee decided to restrict the public from its hearings. Samson Ladiainini is one of the petitioners who were engaged in the talks today with the Defence and Interior Committee in Parliament. He joins me now in the studio for more on this particular meeting. Good afternoon to you, Samson.
Good afternoon, Francis.
And we've had a series of conversations on this bill over a long period. Today, Parliament's Defence and Interior Committee has begun the discussions. What happened today at that meeting?
Well, today we're invited simply to defend or justify the various positions that we put out in our memoranda. And so that was what it was. Myself, I appeared at Ghana Telecom's chamber, Occupy Ghana, the Catholic Secretariat. I think they also submitted some memoranda. They were also there. And I think I heard of one or two other groups that were there. And I left after. It was the Ghana Telecom's chamber that presented first, followed by Occupy Ghana, and I was invited to also justify my various positions, and I did that, and then I left.
So at least for the three groups, the two you saw before your own presentation, was this a presentation to the committee saying, guys, look at this Bible again, we don't want it?
Yes, it is. The Telecom's chamber, for example, has issues with where they are being burdened with the cost of intercepting and retaining the information that will be sought. It's going to be their job, and yet even though it is government that is seeking the information for the purposes of security or whatever it is, they are seeking to put the financial burden or responsibility on the telcos, and they feel that ought not be the case. And again, the telcos actually say that they do not have the capacity. They currently don't have the capability to intercept messages. So what it means is that if the law were passed today into law, they would not be able to intercept any message. And they were saying that all these things ought to be looked at. And of course, they also had issues about where it will breach the confidentiality that their clients are supposed to enjoy.
Okay, so for these concerns they raised, you look at them being the operators for the sector, the telecommunications we have on our phones and tablets. If they are raising these concerns, does that make a stronger case for even us, the consumers?
It does, because for some of us, what we took there, I made a very simple and straightforward argument. In my memorandum, I did list over about 6 different laws that we currently have on our statute books that provide for the job that this law is seeking to do. I did refer them to the narcotics law, I referred them to the telecommunications law, I referred them to the IOCO law. Of course, all of these provide anti-terrorism, money laundering law, all of them provide for the state or security operatives to be able to intercept messages for the purposes of security. But the challenge I had, and the reason for which I submitted, was to the effect that, was the law necessary? Can they justify why it is necessary? And I said it was unnecessary. It was unnecessary to the extent that what the law seeks to do, we already have laws that do exactly that. Okay? Is there urgency for the law? I made the argument that there's no urgency because the laws exist and they do exactly what you're seeking to do, except that the portion in section 4.3 of the new bill, in which the National Security Coordinator is going to be empowered to interfere with my conversation, with your conversation, with everybody else's communication without prior supervision or authorization by a court of law. That is where I had a problem with, because the Constitution in Article 18.2 says that the privacy of my communication and correspondence ought not be interfered with, okay? Even though it provides that that can be interfered with for purposes of national security. I made the argument that that ought not be left in the hands of a national security coordinator who can do it without recourse to a court. So the bottom line of my submission is that no court, no interception.
And that was it.
Ought to be as simple as that.
Okay.
And that's the case I made very formidably, strongly to them. And I believe that they found reason in it. I realized that all the two that had come before me also seemed to make their argument, okay? Because look, it's not fair that the National Security Coordinator should have the right to interfere with my privacy, intercept my communication without reference to anybody. They could use the information for anything, okay? They must do that. If they have to do it rightly, they must go to court and get an order. But so no court, no interception.
Okay, but for the things you presented to the committee today, what was their understanding or response to the issues you were raising with regards to this bill?
Of course, they ask questions. They ask whether or not what I was asking that the coordinator should not be giving that power, whether or not the president didn't already have that power, because I have suggested that in section 100 of the telecommunications law, okay, there is a provision there that gives the president power to be able to interfere with you and our communication for the purposes of national security. But the difference, which I demonstrated to them, is that in that law, which is a present law, in that law, the president, even the president, whom we elect, who is an elected officer, he needs to get that information by an executive instrument. And through the executive instrument, he has to write to make the request to the telcos. But in this present law, the National Security Coordinator does not need to write. He just has to make an oral application, and it will be granted. And I say no, even if the president is required to write, so that there will be evidence. Because look, if the National Security Coordinator interfered with my communication today, and there was a problem with what he did, and we need to contest it, it will be my word against the National Security Coordinator.
Because there will be no document.
There's no trace. He will say, I never intercepted, or I never, eavesdropped on you, and that is wrong. So I say, let's keep that power and keep it to the president. And even with the president, he still needs a written permission, order to be able to do so. Let's not give it to a National Security Coordinator who is not an elected officer to do it without recourse to anybody.
Okay.
I prefer my president doing it, and even that with some restriction as provided in the law now, because the new law is seeking to repeal that provision, which the power is given to the president. The
president alone.
Yes.
Okay, so you had a discussion, you actually made a presentation to the committee today.
Yeah, they ask questions, you justify your points.
Okay, so after this, did they tell you what the process would be?
Well, when they are finished at this point, that's a committee, the Defense and Interior Committee. They will submit, the inputs that have come, and then they will put it at the whole House, and the House will begin a debate.
Okay.
But I say, it doesn't look like it's necessary, and it doesn't look like there's urgency for it. But I make a point that even if it is necessary, it is only necessary to the extent that it is seeking to bring all such laws scattered in over a dozen legislations in this country together into one small book. That one, every lawyer will embrace.
Okay.
So to that extent, it may be necessary, but it's not urgent.
Okay. Now, one last thing, Samson. This was, in many's view, and actually the chairman of the committee told us that this would be a public hearing. Did they explain to you why this was a closed door session?
No, we didn't. I didn't have to ask that, and it didn't really occur to me to want to interrogate that matter. But I just need to point out that there's a small aspect of the law also, which is a big issue, which people like me have canvassed that they need to look at again. Presently, our laws protect you from what we call self-incrimination, so that if you are arrested, you could decline to give information, because it's not your job to give information for that information to be used against you.
Yeah.
You and your wife, your communication is privileged. You and your priest, your pastor, okay, your communication is privileged. You and your lawyer, the discussions that you have are privileged. But with this law and with that animal put in there for the security coordinator, he can abuse it, and it may even become the default. Instead of seeking to go to court, he will simply tap your conversation, use it for whatever he wants, okay, and doesn't really get punished. And then they say, after he has done that, he can come to the court later to confirm it. I say, that is a rather, upside down situation. It's wrong. They should get that one out. What I suspect is that if they are actually listening to all the submissions that have come in so far, what it means is that section 4.3 of the bill will be struck out.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Samson. For the details of today's sitting, actually, the committee sat to hear all the concerns that have been brought before them on this particular interception of postal packets and telecommunications bill, which has been christened as the spy bill. A lot of opposition to it. The committee has had all the concerns. We will wait and see what the report from the committee will be on this matter and what happens also on the floor of Parliament when it comes up for debate. We keep an eye on this story, especially when, for us multimedia, we wrote with Samson Ladi this petition stating our view very clearly on this matter of the spiral and why it is not necessary at this point in the country today. We'll bring you more and keep an eye on this story as and when we have developments for you. Let's move on to another matter.